Hello, I'm Annie. There's Olivia, Dorian, and Amber. We are going to discuss the procedural safeguards document. Um, the first question is why is this document so critical for parents and families of children with disabilities? So procedural safeguards are absolutely crucial for parents and families of children with disabilities because they ensure that the child's educational rights are protected and that the family is involved in and informed about every step of the process, which I think is great because years ago it wasn't like that.
Yeah, I agree.
And
Because I
another,
know, like, sorry, the kids that I work with, like the age group, a lot of them, so they're little kids. They are 9, 10, and 11. And this is their family's like first time kind of going through this. And they have no, like some of them are very lost and they don't know what they're doing. So, I mean, for me, I think just kind of having this in place is so helpful for them just to kind of have like a starting point when they don't know where to go.
um, I'm new to this field, so I'm like really not familiar. I don't really have that much background, so I'm super excited about it. But I am, like I mentioned in our group discussion as a whole, I am in here for my dance school. So I felt like that was this whole procedural safeguard document was just something I really wanted to like dive into to learn, more about so I can spread it to the parents and different things like that, having in place for when I do introduce this new segment with my dance school. So it was really
And another reason we also kind of reviewed of why this document is so important for parents is because it also helps them through the legal process. So if they do run into an incident in the school where they're not possibly correctly following the IEP, it kind of gives them a place where they can go to if they do need to file a due process and go to court with the school. So it's really crucial to have just so both sides are informed and we can figure out what we can do to make the education the best as we can and fair for the child.
Yes. Yep. The second part of this is the content of the various sections. The first section is just general information, which outlines concepts and definitions that parents need to understand the context of special education. Um, kind of like who the parent is, different definitions under federal regulations, what prior written notice is, and just general things like notices about how to get notices through electronic mail, and clarifying what parental consent is and when it's needed. Which I think this is great because parents who are completely new to this have no idea where to start. Even just knowing definitions is really helpful. Let's see. The second section is confidentiality information, and this explains the personal information of the child, and how it's handled to maintain privacy and protection under the law. Um, The third section is state compliant procedures, which focuses on resolving disputes outside of having a hearing, and it's particularly through formal complaints. And this includes the differences between due process hearing complaints and state complaint procedures, and it guides parents through it. The next section is due process complaint procedures, which explains the procedure for filing a formal due process complaint when parents disagree with educational decisions. And this is huge because there's times where parents don't agree and they might think they don't have any rights if they don't know, but this explains it all.
I don't mean to cut you off, but like I said before, I'm new to this. Have any of you guys experienced a situation where a parent disagreed? Or are you guys as I'm sorry, are you guys all teaching in a school where you work with children with disabilities? First, do you guys?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm in a school right now, and like I told you guys in the like the main group, all my kids have autism. So our school is literally 5 to 22. They have to leave on their 22nd birthday. And not the kids that I've worked with, but I know that there's a couple other families who just never agree with what the IEP says, and they kind of like downplay their kids' autism a little bit. So I mean, we've had families who just have not signed the IEP for over a year and they just,
Wow.
yeah. And I know like that, I mean, luckily, like nothing like major ever happened with it, but it was a whole process through their school district, through our school, and just kind of figuring it out. But this year they did sign it, so that's a thank goodness.
That's
Yeah,
good.
the one place that I used to work, one of my clients actually, because I work as a registered behavior tech, I used to do school visits, and one of the families I worked with, almost filed a due process hearing for bullying because they were being excessively bullied in the classroom, which I got to witness. And something happened where it was this whole thing where they met with the school, they met with the parents, and they basically resolved it before it got into any like legal action. But it was one of those times where I think the family really needed to use procedural safeguards because they've never done anything like that before, but it was really affecting the students' education. So it was kind of interesting that I somewhat got to be in that process before it took legal action, but it's the only time I've ever really seen it get to that point.
Yeah. I work with pre-K counts, so I work for 3 to 5 year olds, and there's a couple who are in the process of being evaluated right now. And I know the one who their parents totally disagree with it, but they don't understand how important early intervention is, and getting started with this right away. Let's see. The next section is hearing on due process complaints, and this goes into the procedures and the rights that are associated with due process. I never really knew what due process was, but after reading about this, it just shows how many doors open for families when they need it. Um, this includes impartial due process hearings, hearing rights, and hearing decisions, finality of the decisions, appeals, and impartial review, timelines, and convenience of hearings. The next section is mediation, and this provides information about using mediation as an alternative dispute resolution method. Did you guys know what mediation was? Well, after reading I found out that it's basically trying to resolve the issue before it goes to a hearing.
Yeah,
Um,
that's the case that like basically ours went to is the mediation between the parents and the school and figuring out a resolution to the issue rather than taking it legally. So
Hmm.
yeah, and I only knew what mediation was just like in so before this I worked for CYS. So I was always like in and out of court and a lot of custody battles that I got thrown into that
Oh,
weren't really
wow.
my business. Like I would end up in mediation with these families.
Oh, that was probably good experience though for you.
Yeah, yeah. Just a hard job.
Yeah. The next section is the child's placement pending mediation and due process. And this goes into the where the child's going to be placed while the disputes are being resolved and its process. I'm pro sure, Olivia, you probably heard that too, being with these families.
Yeah.
The next section is what if my child is excluded from school because of discipline issues? And this addresses the disciplinary actions that affect a child's education. It includes when disciplinary actions can be made, the procedures for changing placement, appropriate setting, and the process for appealing. And I personally never knew that disciplinary actions went into all of this. Let's see. And the last section is what special education services are available for my child if parentally placed in a private school. And this describes general guidelines, exceptions, and explains the concept of equitable participation in special education services. Um, okay, so what did you guys learn from this document?
Well, overall, I just learned that this was a document that was designed to protect individuals by making sure that the parents had access to fair procedures and certain processes. For example, educational planning for children with disabilities, or when appealing legal decisions. And as I mentioned before, I'm not really familiar with like this. I'm new to this, and I really didn't understand how much of this stuff was needed to be in place for children that had disabilities, because I'm actually going to say this for the end, but I work for pre-K counts too, and I
Ah,
want to talk to you about something because my director? Because pre-K counts, do you work in the school or do you work in a daycare?
So I'm in a daycare, but it follows Neshaminy School District.
So same. I'm in a daycare, but she's underneath, like she's joint with other daycare providers, but she
Yes.
doesn't allow, and I don't know if I should be saying this, but she doesn't allow for kids that have IEPs to join. So like
Really?
yeah, and that's what I was going to talk about. That's why I'm so like, I just work with gen ed students. Like if they have IEP, like I guess they talk to her about it, and she have them come in and they do like a trial run, and if she
Yeah.
feels they're not a good fit, she doesn't accept them. And
Yeah, actually, I had a similar situation. Pre-K counts, like it's basically the director who chooses who
that's
comes in.
yeah, that's not fair. So I'm
Yeah.
like a lot. Like I'm learning a lot because, like I said, I'm not familiar with like IEPs or anything. So
Yeah,
that's it.
That's
But
like really like that just doesn't seem legal.
I
Yeah.
know.
Like uh
I know.
but for me, like I did know like a decent amount of this kind of stuff, but just kind of leaning more into that like legal aspect of it, like that part I wasn't really familiar with. So like I thought that whole section was very interesting.
I
Hmm.
found there's this part that got into basically when something becomes a part of an expense and how to determine if the parent should pay for it or if it should be a public expense and how that kind of works and how they decide on that was pretty interesting. I'd like to know more information about that because I'm sure it's really like specific to the situation, but um it would be nice to know like what's considered a parent's expense and how that becomes their responsibility.
Yeah.
I was interested about that too because what about like I know the kids in my school like especially in the lower school like they're very low income. So like
Mhm.
what about those kids who like their families just cannot afford it and
Right.
if they're like
Right.
well, this is a family expense like who determines that like that yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, yeah, no, I agree. Um, and also knowing more about how the safeguards play out in real world scenarios.
Yeah, I like I know they can't put like actual real examples in this because it's like a legal document, but like I would love to see like just like a case scenario or something where they talk like, okay, this happened to so and so and here's what we did.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. So I think if we want to find out more information about this, we could probably go to like the school district website. I'm sure they have information.
Yeah, you can always like I know like if you contact like the LEA, like they're always able to help and each school district has one.
Yeah.
Um, or just contact the school directly.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I was just about to say it might be helpful to contact the school directly and see what they say about it. I know, like Annie said, that there's a school district website, and then there's also like this state Department of Education that you could always contact.
Hmm.
I know the Pennsylvania education website has a decent amount of information on it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
They might have something.
And like I
Yeah,
feel
that
like sorry, go ahead.
no, you can go.
I was gonna say, like, I feel like the schools that have like school counselors and social workers, they're always super, super helpful. Like that's who I've always found to just be able to answer all the questions or get the questions answered for me.
Yeah. I feel like trying to figure out who to contact for information is always the hardest part, especially like pre-K counts, Dorian. I'm like, who do I contact for this?
yeah, but I told you I'm really going to talk to you about this afterwards because I want to be like an advocate for that because it's like so many parents they come in like to see them get turned away.
Yeah.
It really saddens me because I'm like sometimes it is I can't imagine how hard it is to find like a specific place for your child to go. Like I said, I don't
Hmm.
know much about it, but it just don't seem fair. So I'm
Yeah,
that's
there's not enough like accountability, you know what I mean? They're very free to do what they want.
right. But I'm gonna talk to you about it to see what your school does or what your pre-K counts do and who I
Okay.
should above her because I know it's somebody above her that I can
Yeah.
probably put something in their ear.
Yeah, I do have contact and depending on where you're at, I've like the contact for the higher up, so.
You guys think for pre-K counts, is it like a part of maybe like not having access to services for those students? Or do you think there's enough staff?
Um, I don't, because where I'm at, I know that they're very short-staffed. I don't know. I just think there's too much freedom.
I
Interesting.
agree with you, and it's funny that you asked that because I'm the only teacher in there, and as you can see, I really don't have like the credentials, I guess, for it to host a class of 10 plus,
Mhm.
especially if you have like, specific needs. But I
Right.
will they have the power to add the additional supports, to make accommodations, to modify whatever. So that's
Mm.
where I'm starting to get a little upset with, because it's like, if they get a budget, especially for the way she is, if they get a budget and she can say, I want to pay, this special education sorry, it's been a long day. This special education teacher to come in and do this X, Y, and Z, or I want to create a small class for a certain amount of kids. She could do whatever. That's how much freedom that my boss had. They get money for technology, they get
Yep.
money for whatever she wants to do. So that's why I'm
Wow.
like, why aren't you doing what you need to do, especially if it's a school district program? It's not just your day center. And once the pre-K counts program entered the room, you should have automatically thought about those kids who would need, special attention. And I'm sorry for my terminology, because like I said, I'm pretty sure it's other terminology I'm supposed to be using. But I'm starting to notice that that's why I jumped back into school, because I'm kind of doing the same thing with my personal business. It's my personal business just like it's hers. So it's like, why am I limiting my dance school to just what they consider gen ed? So
Yeah.
I really, like you said, just the freedom that she has to do what she want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I just think it's particularly interesting because I used to work as a pre-K teacher for 2 years, and our school was very open to all kids coming in, and they would be also like supported with behavioral therapy, occupational therapy, and speech that would also come into our school. So they had those supports regardless of if it was provided by our staff or not. So that's
Mhm.
why I feel like your situation is really interesting to look into.
I'm
Yeah.
looking to
Something's like off.
Yeah, it is, but it's something off with my boss. That's the thing too. That's why I said it's a whole nother. I'm not gonna take up the time talking about her. It really determines who's holding the ball. That's the sad part.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Does anyone have any other questions?
So I know like I'm curious, and again, like I always think about my families and like they don't know where to get this information from. Like I would like to know like how is this information being provided? Like is the school district giving it to them? Like do they really have to search for themselves, or like how do they know? How do they know that these resources are available to them?
Well, I
Yeah.
think there's supposed to be someone who, I forget what they're called. There's someone's job is to do that, right? I forget what they're called.
And that's what I mean, like, but what when they don't? Like who, you
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Uh-huh. Right. Try and Google it. You're gonna get all these random.
and it's so overwhelming.
Hmm.
I wish there was just like one like central, and like I know like for us, like we have binders for our families that they can take and they have so many resources in them, but like what about the schools that don't? What about the school districts that just don't care?
Yeah,
Right.
it's also concerning too, because like with the last question with how would you explain the rights contained in the document to parents with a newly diagnosed disability, it's also extremely difficult because many parents that are new to like experiencing their child with a disability may not even know that these rights exist.
Right?
And if the school just has a person that's supposed to provide them and families don't know that they can ask because they don't know this exists, then it makes access even harder, especially if, say, the family is not English speaking and they need the document to also be in a different language. There's a lot of barriers I feel that parents either don't know that they have the rights, it's not provided to them in their language, and just things like that. It becomes really difficult.
Yeah.
And I think too, like a lot of times, like depending on what the child's disability is, like they might, like the school might assume like the doctor gave it to them. The doctor might assume like the hospital gave it to them, or like the specialist. The specialist might assume like the pediatrician. Like, and I think that like I would rather get 100 of the same pieces of paper than not get one at all because you assumed
Yeah.
or like didn't think to ask. And I don't think there's any like ill intent with it, but I think that they see so many people and they just don't think about it. It's like out of sight, out of mind. And then the
Hmm.
families don't know.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Any other questions?
I don't think I had any, not that I can think of anyway.
Yeah, if anything, honestly, my main question was kind of what we just talked about is like, how are we ensuring people are getting notice of their rights and like how to go about these disputes because they may not even know until a dispute pops up and then they're like, oh, look at all these rights that I didn't know I had. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and then they'll take that to the hearing with them, and that won't be good.
yeah.
And as you guys are talking, not to keep dragging it out, but it's actually important and it's important to me. I'm
Mhm.
noticing that you have to be very strenuous when it comes down to this. Like Jeanette is not like this. And then the nicest way possible, because like I said, I want to dive deeper into this. It's way more work. And
Mhm.
that's probably why she doesn't want to deal with it. It seems like it's a lot of paperwork, which
Mhm.
I've totally worth it. But I'm noticing that. So like I have a whole bunch of questions, but we don't have time for that. But I'm noticing that too. It's all of these things are set in place, man. And that's something that she would probably have to add to her thing. And she would have to be responsible for this and make sure she's on top of that. And you know what I mean? And some people, especially with pre-K counts, if you have the freedom, you probably would just rather not have to deal with it and deal with parents who are experiencing children that just were newly diagnosed. Like that could be a lot on a parent, the child, and that's probably where the only thing I can assume um, about why she's going about it this way.
Yeah.
You have to have these.
And then like having to prove it to people when they come in to see the paperwork and things like that, which I mean that's your job.
Right.
It could be that like she might just be like, this is too much.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Like, and that's
So
fair, but also like it's not fair for the kids.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
Especially the kids who need it. I mean, pre-K
Exactly.
counts is for kids who need it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It could help so much with socialization skills
Yeah.
and those like skills you
Yeah.
need when you're developing. So,
Yeah.
And some need like a push environment. That's what I don't think is fair because you're judging a kid 2 to 3 days. It's like a 2 to 3 day window. And it's like
Hmm.
some time to settle in. Like it's time, like even now, talking about this is new for me. I'm like nervous. Y'all probably could tell because I'm like stumbling over my words. I'm not
Mhm.
as in it as my classmates might be. So it's like sometimes you got to look at it like in a child's perspective too. Like this might be new for them. It might be the first time they were in a
Yeah.
class setting that large or whatever. You just don't know. So it's like I don't think it's fair. I really don't like that.
Especially three-year-olds. I mean, they're coming in not knowing anything.
Yeah.
And I have some kids in my classroom now where it's like, oh my God. So it's like that's not fair. Every kid is special and unique in their own way.
Mhm.
And the
So
child that I have who was going through the evaluation process, he has made so much progress from the beginning to I've had him, this is my second year having him. And he he's made so much progress and he's getting ready to go to kindergarten. And I'm like, he's ready.
that's awesome.
I love that.
But all right. I don't have any more questions.
me neither.
Do
No,
anything.
Well, thank you guys for a great discussion.
Thanks.
thank you guys.
And we will all talk soon.
Yes.
Good.
Have a good night.
Thanks, you
Bye.
too.